While conducting an exploration of the Titanic's wreckage, researchers noticed something peculiar. Beneath the ocean's surface, the ship's bow remains in remarkably good condition. However, the stern lies in a severely deteriorated state and is situated some 2,000 feet away. This disparity is particularly striking given that the Titanic disaster occurred approximately 110 years ago, and after lying submerged for so many years, the iron and steel components have naturally succumbed to rust and decay. The question that now arises is this: if both sections belonged to the very same vessel and sank simultaneously, why is there such a vast difference in their respective conditions? According to researchers, on that fateful night in 1912, something else, beyond just the collision with the iceberg, must have befallen the ship, resulting in the stern sustaining the most extensive damage. On the night in 1912 when the Titanic met its tragic end, the vessel was sailing alone amidst the pitch-black waters of the ocean, some 700 kilometers off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. At the time of the disaster, there were a total of 2,240 passengers and crew members on board. Of these, 1,500 perished in the tragedy. It was a ship that had once been marketed as unsinkable, a vessel impervious to the perils of the sea. Yet, within a mere 2.5 hours, all the pride associated with that unsinkable ship was utterly shattered by the overwhelming power of nature. The only eyewitnesses to this disaster were those who, in a desperate bid to save their lives, either plunged into the frigid waters of the Atlantic Ocean or managed to secure a seat in one of the lifeboats. Apart from these survivors, who were themselves preoccupied with the struggle to stay alive in the freezing water, no one else possessed a record of the events that unfolded, from the moment of impact with the iceberg until the ship finally slipped beneath the waves. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, 9 other vessels were also navigating the North Atlantic, all traveling within the same shipping lane. As the ship began to sink, wireless distress signals were transmitted to every nearby vessel in a desperate plea for rescue. However, the first rescue ship to arrive, the RMS Carpathia, reached the scene a full hour and a half after the Titanic had gone down. Even so, it proved to be a stroke of luck for them. They received a distress call from the Titanic. Had they not, the lives of those battling for survival in the freezing waters would surely have been lost. Furthermore, the true nature of the Titanic disaster might have remained unknown to the world to this very day. During the initial stages of the investigation, no one could quite grasp what had actually befallen the ship that fateful night. However, survivors subsequently reported that the vessel had struck a massive iceberg. Investigators accepted these eyewitness accounts as credible, for the rescue team had personally observed traces of the Titanic's red paint still embedded within the ice. Based on eyewitness testimony and physical evidence gathered after the accident, the official investigation report concluded that a 300-foot gash had been torn into the Titanic's starboard side, meaning that a crack spanning 1/3 of the ship's length had opened up along one flank. Yet, conversely, witnesses maintained that it had taken approximately 2.5 hours for the Titanic to sink completely. According to the investigators, had a 300-foot breach truly existed in the hull, the ship should have gone down not in 2.5 hours, but within a mere 10 minutes, hours, but within a mere 10 minutes. However, at that time, no one possessed a clear understanding of what had actually transpired aboard the ship that day. Obtaining accurate information necessitated locating the Titanic itself. In that era, technology was not nearly as advanced as it is today. Consequently, locating the vessel amidst the vast expanse of the ocean was no easy feat. Expeditions to discover the Titanic's wreckage continued for several years. As time passed, rather than forgetting the disaster, public curiosity regarding its mysteries only intensified. You might be astonished to learn that the Titanic's sinking left behind so many unanswered questions that search operations dedicated solely to locating the ship continued for 73 years. Finally, in 1985, the wreckage of the Titanic was discovered. This marked a monumental triumph for the marine industry. The time had at last arrived to seek answers to the many mysteries that had emerged in the wake of the Titanic's sinking. Numerous expeditions were organized, comprising teams of experts who captured countless images of the Titanic's wreckage. Oceanic explorer Paul Henry visited the wreck of the Titanic more than 30 times to conduct research on the vessel, the very explorer who was recently a victim of the Titan submersible disaster. Yet not once did he observe a 300-foot-wide gash along the hull of the Titanic. Based on this photograph captured at the wreck site, it can be inferred that the impact was confined to an area of merely 30 feet. This specific area spans a total of just 11 square feet. Calculations reveal that through this small breach, water surged into the Titanic at a rate of 370 gallons per second. Given this rate of inflow, it would take a total of 2.5 hours for the entire ship to become completely submerged, and, according to eyewitness accounts, the Titanic did indeed sink within that same 2.5-hour time frame on that fateful night. Thus, after 73 years, a mystery was finally solved. The Titanic did not suffer a massive 300-foot-long gash. Rather, the collision with the ice resulted in a 30-foot-long lee fung. However, this is not the only mystery. There remain other mysteries yet to be solved. Following an investigation into the wreckage of the Titanic, researchers were baffled as to why the ship's forward section, known as the bow, rested on the seabed in a significantly better condition than its aft section, or stern. Furthermore, they questioned the immense distance separating the two sections. To unravel this mystery, researchers turned to high-tech sonar technology. By deploying remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, beneath the waves, they captured hundreds of thousands of images covering the Titanic and its surrounding debris field. These images were then utilized to construct a detailed 3D model of the Titanic wreckage using computer graphics. This 3D model incorporated every minute detail, elements that would be impossible to discern using standard cameras or the naked eye. The 3D model revealed that the entire structure of the Titanic's bow section had collapsed inward, as if the ship were constructed of paper rather than steel. Scattered around it lay countless detached components. The only major structures remaining firmly attached were the two massive engines, each comparable in size to a single-story building. The model also held the key to another hidden mystery, one that explained why the ship's stern section lay in such a severely damaged state. The impact marks left when the stern slammed into the seabed 110 years ago remain visible to this day, marks that can only be observed through the aid of the 3D model. Based on these markings, researchers were able to conclusively determine that as the stern section broke away and plummeted toward the ocean floor, it began to spin in a counterclockwise direction. Experts analyzing these marks concluded that the stern section descended through the water while rotating at a staggering speed of 80 kilometers per hour. As the stern section plunged at such high velocity, the immense hydrostatic pressure of the water caused the ship's loose components to tear away. Consequently, when it finally slammed into the seabed 4 kilometers below the surface, all of its decks were crushed inward. In contrast, the bow section, the ship's forward portion, featured a hydrodynamic design. This meant it was capable of slicing through the water with ease, much in the same way a ship effortlessly cuts through the waves to carve its own path while sailing on the surface. For this reason, the forward section did not descend while spinning like the aft section. Furthermore, the water pressure did not exert the same kind of force upon it. Thus, yet another mystery surrounding the disaster that occurred 110 years ago was finally solved. However, one lingering curiosity remained, prompting experts to launch a new investigation to uncover the answer. This particular question concerned the precise moment at which the Titanic broke in two. You might be surprised to learn that when eyewitnesses described the Titanic breaking apart before sinking, no one at the time believed their accounts. Experts assumed that a ship constructed using the most advanced technology of that era could never possibly split in two. As the bow section filled with water, it began to submerge. Consequently, the entire weight of the stern section shifted to and bore down upon the ship's center point. At that moment, the aft section was tilted at an angle of 30 degrees. However, the immense pressure concentrated at the center point ultimately caused the ship to snap in two. Yet, a 3D model generated through sonar scanning presents a different explanation. Various parts of the Titanic and numerous artifacts, such as coffee cups, dinner plates, boots, deck benches, and passengers' personal belongings, lie scattered across the ocean floor, spread out far beyond the immediate vicinity of the wreck itself. Of these items, 90% originated from the aft section of the ship. In total, more than 10,000 items are scattered across an area spanning 3.2 square kilometers. Had the aft section completely detached while still at the surface, the smaller parts and artifacts from the stern section would have been flung across an even wider area, exceeding 2.3 square kilometers, by the time they reached the ocean floor, just as you can observe in this animation. Based on this evidence, experts have concluded that while the ship did indeed break in two while still at the surface, the two sections remained physically connected to one another. It was only as they neared the very bottom of the ocean that the two sections finally separated completely. As it tumbled and spun, the stern section shifted direction and plunged down at a speed of 2,000 feet per minute. Today, the entire hull of the Titanic is encrusted with rust. Given the rate at which this corrosion is progressing, the ship may well vanish into the ocean depths within just a few more decades. You can clearly grasp this reality simply by looking at this massive 25-ton section recovered from the Titanic. Well, friends, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a like.